All right. Hopefully this microphone sounds okay. It's a new mic connected to my phone. This is a topic I've been wanting to put out there for some time, and for the 300 or 400 people who actually chime in and listen and watch, I appreciate the comments. I appreciate bouncing these ideas off and getting feedback, agree or disagree. It's nice to have the conversation. Back in 2016, when I was deeply down the rabbit hole, I mean, I didn't sleep. I watched every video about the Mandela effect, everything anybody had to say. And I did a video called Made of Code back then, and I hadn't seen anybody else talk about that before. So that was, I thought, needed to be said. I called it Made of Code and started to link all of the Mandela effects that I thought pointed to Jesus. There was one other fella who was saying it's all about Jesus. His name was Andrew. Starts with a B. His last name. He might be listening, but he was saying that, and but I started linking the code, like code words or messages, and that's what us conspiracy minded folks like to do. We like to connect the dots. We like to see where things might be connected, coincidence, synchronicity, and we like to bring it up. And for the hardcore, deeply Mandela affected people out there, I have yet to meet one who's not a conspiracy minded truther of sorts. Let me give you an example of this. So back in 2008 is when I kind of like woke up. I was unemployed just long enough to start looking into some things that I'd already heard whispers of, and I said, well, let's just see. And I started. Oh my gosh, world changed. Everybody thought I was crazy. People disowned me. Friends and family laughed at me. It was insane. But from that day on, 2008, I could not help but look at the world around me with all of its signs and all of its uniquenesses. So y'all know very well what I'm talking about. Once you know, it's like that scene in Interview with a Vampire. Yes, A. It's like that scene where Brad Pitt's in the graveyard and he becomes the vampire for the first time, and his eyes just see the world around him for the first, like he's never seen it before. He just sees all these things he's never noticed. He's got new eyes. He's got new vampire eyes. He can see it all. So I got my new eyes back in 2008, and I just could not help but every movie, every corporate logo, it seemed like entertainment and music, it all had similar symbols and references and verbiage, and we see it over and over. I mean, it was like enough already. You just can't beat this dead horse any longer. How does not everybody see the redundancy and the constant pushing of it? I mean, that's once it happens, it happens. You become this person who just starts seeing all this stuff, and the Mandela effect people see the Mandela effects, and they also, it's like something's opened up, and all of a sudden you know when the world's changed, and you also see symbolism. But with Jesus, it's kind of interesting because amongst the Mandela affected, you either have the Christian or the non-Christian, and I think the reason the non-Christians don't want to talk about things connecting to Jesus, and they don't want to see that or acknowledge it, is because Jesus can be very offensive, or at least the people who push Jesus can be very pushy. They can be very judgmental. They can be very annoying. They can be very close-minded in a lot of ways, and groupthink. And it's frustrating. So the last thing you want to do is start associating yourself with a group of people. If you're non-Christian, you don't want to associate yourself with this group that you find doing a lot of things you disagree with. Makes sense. So for a moment, I'd like to see if I can just set that bias aside and just say, is there any truth to the connection to Jesus and Mandela effects, or are we just reading too much into it? Is it just wishful thinking? So for the non-believer, I would say try to set your bias aside, your dislike for the pushiness and judgmentalism that you've seen in Christians that you might be offended with. I mean, it's common, I agree. is try and set that aside and just look at it and without interpretation, just see if there's a connection with Mandela effects and Jesus without any, you don't have to link it to the next thing that it might suggest or mean. You don't have to do anything. Just see if there's any kind of connection. But the reason I was thinking I was watching Amadeus on Netflix because it's going to be off at the end of June, and I think I saw this when I was a teenager, and I'm watching it, and of course, the first thing, you can't watch a movie anymore without picking up on this stuff in the background. I mean, it's like every movie now, and this is what I'm saying. As truthers, we just connect these. We see repetition in symbols. We see all the stuff, and that kind of relates to the Mandela effect as well. And another hint that I need to talk about this was the last video I did, which all credit goes to Dan, Scared Performance Channel. He's the one who pointed this one out to me, the Bausch and Lomb that change. And so just a couple comments started sending me down this road again. And this one says, "Borsch and lamb has changed." Lots of laugh, right? So I was like, when he said that and he referenced lamb, I thought, I wonder. So I had to look it up. And I had to reply. The surname that may have originated, this is just right out of, definition on the internet. Surname that may have originated from Old English word loam, meaning lamb or young sheep. Why does that have any significance? Why does that make me laugh? Because, let me explain this. If you don't already know, Jesus is often referred to as the Lamb. He is the sacrificial lamb, died for our sins. He's the blood sacrifice. He's also referred to as the Lion. So there's many names for Jesus, which can make it easier to find Mandela effects that point to Jesus, because he is called the Lamb. He is called the Lion. He is called the Judge, the Harvester, for judgment. He's going to separate the wheat and the tares. The Groom. He's known for mercy, blood sacrifice, beginning and the end. He is also called the Word, or the Logos in Greek, which, of course, Mandela effects are all about logos, it seems. The Light and Life, King of Kings, Morning Star, Healer. It goes on and on. Well, I don't know how far it goes on, but these are some common names. Now, I have tried to take Mandela effects and see if I could take any other category and try and apply them to that category and see if I could get just as many hits or connections for, like, Voldemort on Harry Potter, or just some wild thing. Does the number of coincidences and Mandela effects that point to the same, does it work? And I can't duplicate that, but I can't say that every Mandela effect for me that I clearly see a connection to Jesus. It's not 100% in it. That could be that I'm just not, I'm not capable of seeing it. That's the possibility there. Maybe I just don't have enough insight. Another thing that sparked this was the comment that said, "We all need some corrective vision to see spiritually. He has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, lest they see with their eyes and understand with their heart in turn, and I would heal them." Now that's relating to the Bausch and Lomb video and corrective lenses. And speaking of which, Rocker Chick says, "This one is huge. I wore contacts my whole life, and it was always Bausch and Lomb, Lomb with an E." And let me just take a moment to read this one comment that was on the last video. I've had so many personal reality glitches the last 2 weeks. For one thing, I remembered the Brood X cicada invasion happening in 2017. I don't remember that. I don't know it. But in 2017, the Brood X cicada invasion happening in 2017. I hadn't even questioned whether it actually happened or not until last week, because of course it did. I have photos, except it didn't. The huge double brood, once in a lifetime massive swarm, did not happen in 2017. It is currently happening now. I have periodically mentioned it ever since it happened 7 years ago, when I see a cicada. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't know. However, it didn't happen. Also, Qantas Airlines mascot is a kangaroo, and and always has been in this reality, not a koala. I even recall a Mandela effect video about this years ago talking about it in the reverse, so evidently it flip-flopped. I don't recall who made the video because it was probably in 2017 or 18. There have been a few other things as well. It's been an odd couple of weeks in my life, so she's definitely going through the flip-flops. So getting back to, do Mandela effects point to Jesus? Y'all might have your own versions of this, but loam and lamb. Also, remember the A's all turning into the lambda symbol. That it loses the little dash in the middle. It turns into a lambda symbol, another lamb reference. Snow White is definitely a reference to purity. There's a verse in the Bible that says Jesus will make, it's referring to prophetically, Jesus will make your sins as white as snow. God will make you pure again. The Hi Ho song has changed to coming home rather than going out. Good night, Gracie is good night to grace. Good night, like as if to say God's patience is run out and it's over. That comes back to Jesus being the judge again. Good night, Gracie is a good night to grace statement. Lucy's got some splaining to do. It's judgment. Once again, Jesus is the judge. Lucifer has some splaining to do for Day of Reckoning type of stuff. Dark Father in Luke. Luke, I'm your father. It's like Darth Vader's Dark Father saying that he is the Father rather than God. So it's an opposition statement. Corn, all the references to corn, so many references. Corn flakes, which is a big one for me, and the VW logo, which is the wheat and the tares symbolism. And there's so many references to corn in the Bible and changes in Mandela effect. It all comes back to harvest. Field of dreams. You build it, he will come is a harvest statement. Field of dreams, all about the harvest. And then also, you build it, he will come. It might refer to the second coming of Jesus. Life was like a box of chocolates rather than an is like. So life has changed somehow. Something's different now. That doesn't necessarily point to Jesus, but it's a statement about time, present versus past, which we've also seen with the Apollo 13. Tom Hanks saying we've had versus we have a problem. There's presence and past theme going on there. Not sure there's a connection to Jesus, just saying it. Jaws, where he says we're going to need a bigger boat, as in, the flood, need a big boat. Of course, there's also the we versus you statement. In the first one, he's part of the group, and now he's suddenly separate. And it also, there is a connection to a lot of Mandela effects being a degradation. It doesn't make sense now. It's not as funny, or it doesn't make sense. Like him saying you're going to need a bigger boat doesn't make sense. For Gracie at the end of the show to just say, George Burns says, say goodnight, Gracie, and instead of doing a joke out of it, she just says goodnight, like she's just some mindless puppet obeying his command. I mean, it's not funny. It's a downgrade. Just like in I See Dead People versus I See White People. One line is funny, the other one's just lame. Lots of Mandela effects are like dull and boring compared to what they were or should have been. That's definitely a theme. I can't say that I see that in every Mandela effect, but it's definitely a theme there that things are worse now than they were before. Dolly having braces and not having braces is probably the epitome of stupidity. I mean, it's just what this scene makes no sense at all, and it's dumbed down completely. And then I thought about flip-flops, because I've heard people say that all the Mandela effects. I've heard some people say that Mandela effects are an improvement to our reality, which I disagree with completely, as I just stated. And some say that it's symbolic for things going from two to one, or plural, many to one to singular. But we've seen flip-flops where that's not true. Tidy Cats, we all know that when it changed, a whole group of us watched it go, like in the period of just a couple weeks passing. Tidy Cats, everybody saw Tidy Cats. You go to your closet the next day and it said tidy cat. The S was gone from every box out there. It was just one singular tidy cat. But then a week later, it's back to tidy cats, and everybody was saying, what just happened? We just saw this flip back right back to tidy cats. So I don't have a connection to Jesus, maybe purity, because it has to do with cat litter, maybe a lion reference there with the feline. I don't know. That's stretching it. I did see, though, the combination of plural to singular to plural. So you got 212. Or gematria would say 2012, and everybody talks about 2012 being a big deal. The same 212 happened with Hillary Clinton, where she had two L's in her name. She then had one L in her name and then went back to two L's, 212. Again, Judgment. The vampire movie might have something to do with blood sacrifice. Judgment, maybe. There's also satanic reference, possibly. Son of Man, or Nelson of Mandela. Son of Man, right in the middle of that phrase. And then Silence of the Lambs, I've already said. It's got the Lamb statement. And there's more. I mean, this is just me coughing up these real quick. Y'all might even, please, throw in comments more connections that you see. If you see connections to this pointing to Jesus, any signs that say this is about Jesus, shoot it in the comments. I am just curious how strong of a case can be built. Back to the Bausch and Lomb. Looking at the loam, these are just some things I found. So, oops, didn't mean for that. A bump or swelling. There could also be from, I guess, the loam. Loam can be laughing out my beverage. So there's a couple other possibilities there, but I thought the lamb connection was huge. Loam can be used as a given name, can be strong or powerful, brave and courageous. Of course, these are attributes that we give to a lion. So loam has a connection to the lion and the lamb, interestingly enough. Loam is a surname that may have originated from Old English word loam, meaning lamb or young sheep. So I do want to thank everyone for those recent comments about the Bausch and Lomb and mentioning the lamb and getting me thinking about this. There's another conversation I've been meaning to have about a dysfunction that I see amongst the Christian Mandela effect community. Its connection to the world and the church that is commonly accepted today, the beliefs of modern day Christianity and your typical main denominations. Why there's a conflict there and why there's a conflict amongst so many inside the Mandela effect Christian community. There's a lot of issues with that. And then go back to even the early church examples and whether or not that is a good one to emulate or not. But that is it's more of a harsh criticism to the Christian group, and I've heard many times people who are not Christians. I remember one of my first was one lady, black lady, was just laughing and criticizing the Christians for constantly putting their junk out there and arguing amongst each other so much. It's like, can't y'all get along? She said, I'm not even Christian, but it's y'all look ridiculous. That is something I'd like to go into a little bit more about why there's so much fighting and disagreement and bad examples in the Christian group. But then I'd also like to say, even if we come down with a solid, definitive, yes, these connections to Jesus are pretty strong. You can see it over and over and over again. And let's say you do make the connection that there is a Jesus reference. What that necessarily means, who's doing it, why it's done. I think we jump to a lot of conclusions there, but maybe we should stop for a second and say, is it necessarily meaning what all the assumptions are? But it's worth having a discussion about that too. Anyway, today I just wanted to get out there this idea and just see if people would offer up any more connections that they see to Jesus and Mandela effects. Any connections at all there? I've listed a few real quick, and I'm sure some of you got even more. And if you've got any video links that you want to post that tie to other people that have seen it, we know that EYA has done a bunch of biblical changes. I'm not talking about that so much, the Bible changes, as I am just talking about just Mandela effects that might have some sort of symbolism of Jesus behind them, like secular Mandela effects that have a symbolism towards Jesus. But I will say that in the Bible, the lion shall lay with the lamb, that's a big one. The idea of the bottles instead of wineskins, that changed, and that one changed before my eyes. I personally saw the separation of wheat and tares paragraph in Mark chapter 4 change right before my eyes. That was a solid, I mean, that was huge. That was so huge. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. For me, Genesis chapter 1, nobody talks about this one. Nobody was there with me. But for a while, I was in that reality where Genesis chapter 1, God saying it was very good, was him looking back at the creation of Eve, the woman, she wasn't named Eve, but it was about the creation of the woman in that reality. And there was like commentaries and sermons that were done about God's, being very pleased when he created the woman, where everything else was, or very good. He was like, this is good, this is good, this is good. That's a theme throughout Genesis chapter 1, repeating this is good. And then he got to the woman and it was very good that he created the woman. But now this reality doesn't have that. There's completely gone. It's flip-flopped, because when it was the woman, I was confused. I was like, I certainly, with all the study I've done of Genesis, the first few chapters, this is something I would know. How am I not recalling this in my past? So I was very confused. And then it flipped back to what it is now. So now very good is just all of creation. That's a huge Bible change for me. These are not like, that's another whole conversation I want to get into, is how we determine what is a valid Mandela effect and what is just crazy. I know a bunch of mine, people would just say, well, that's just crazy and that's only you. But I experienced them with such fullness. They're like locked in 100%. I don't have a question, but what can you do? Anyway, let me end my rambling. Y'all have a great day. Really appreciate the comments and any thing that sparks from the next one. Who knows? It could be the lead in to the next video. But thanks for the few who do listen and comment. God bless.